But but then we have our personal relationship, and if there is going to be some sort of communication before the overhanging, like the top down structures come in, it will be something that comes out of how the like us as a culture, as
Hmm.
a larger psychedelically informed culture and cultures have engendered those relationships, or genders is, I'll leave gender out of this, even though that's obviously not what I meant, but like how we've learned to build our relationship with psychedelics personally and culturally, which is a lot of what this show is all about, is kind of like helping that larger cultural relationship be formed, based in a certain way of, like, inviting a certain way of thinking about it, talking about it, experiencing it, relating to it. And that's why I want to take a shift, because I want to focus in on this personal relationship, and I want to focus in on you putting your lens onto the
Hmm.
relationship between people and their psychedelic experiences, out of your, experience supporting people as a relationship coach. um, and the lens that we were talking about you wanting to put over was what you called the layers of relating. And so before we go there, it would be helpful, I think, for us, the listeners, to have a sense of what is the layers of relating. So if you can give us give us the full and complete spiel on layers of relating that we'll need to understand in order to later on apply it to psychedelics.
Yeah. So I see it as there's four different layers, or you could think of it as spheres that we engage in relationship with people. The most closest is the relationship with a capital R, the people that we are super and not maybe not necessarily enmeshed with, but have very, very deep levels of relationship with. Behind that, there is a layer of intimacy where these are people we can share intimate experiences with. We maybe don't have that close, familial, long lasting sense of connection with. But, there are people you can hug, there are people you can share your emotional life with. Behind that is a layer of safety. These are people you feel safe being around, people you feel safe in community with. You know a little bit about them, you have a sense of what each other's values are, enough to know that you can feel expressed in that space. And beyond that is a level of awareness, which is just you exist. And in life we might choose to engage with people in one layer or another. What I find is that in intimate relationships and romantic relationships, very often we see someone we like, we have good chemistry, feel it mutually, and we want to dive straight in to that very deep level of capital R relationship. And we will sometimes do so bypassing all the other layers of awareness, safety, and intimacy. And so, in the sort of default model, I'll see people dive into like relationship, like we're partners now, we're going to do this. And through time, then they're developing more, they're, through having more intimate experiences, they're developing more awareness of each other. And it's 5 or 7 years down the line they realize, oh my god, you're actually not the person I thought you were. And, like, you voted for who? How, what are we doing here? This is very different from how a lot of us approach friendships, which is we start off by just being aware of people and then working on developing safety, and then having repeated experiences of safety leading to intimacy, and repeated experiences of intimacy leading to that sense of close relationship.
Interesting. So I think maybe I'm wondering if there are other examples of how we can jump into these layers of relating, that might be dysfunctional. Like, for example, I'm thinking about jumping straight into intimacy and not worrying about safety or relationship. And if you have a sense of what underlying deep psychological complexities, issues, or whatever might inform those behaviors, and then what those deep psychological things that inform those behaviors will contribute to the problems that arise out of that type of behavior.
Yeah, so a lot of us have a need for safety, security, and stability. These are primal needs that every being has, and depending on your attachment styles and experience in childhood, or even your current circumstances, sometimes people can have a sort of hunger for intimacy. Some people experience something called touch hunger, They really, really want to be touched. And the moment there is an opportunity for touch, let's say at a festival, there's like a cuddle puddle or something like that. They want to go straight into that experience of physical intimacy. It's not necessarily a sexual space, but just physical intimacy. Maybe not checking in, like who's here, or maybe I'm the person who's doing this, and I even don't realize that I'm sick, and I might actually be coughing on people and spreading that sickness to them, or things like that. Very often, when people are diving into those deeper layers of intimacy and relationship before doing all the other work, it's because there's a sense of urgency to have a need met. And that sense of urgency often comes because the need has gone unmet for a very long time, or has been the way that they were having it met has been removed traumatically. So, someone who's just gone through a very difficult breakup, for example, is going to be feeling that absence and loss in their psyche, and so may try harder to go deeper to try and fill that void. And someone who has maybe never had much connection with other people might walk into a space where that there's permission for that connection, and not have the skills of just moving through those layers gradually and just dive straight in without realizing they can't swim in these waters yet, or they don't know these waters well enough to swim in them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and what might be the consequence of that? Like overwhelm, maybe misconduct.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, nervous system overwhelm for the individual, I think, is a big one. And we can see this happen in festival experiences. People want to dive straight into the experience and maximize their enjoyment of it. And then there's that like crash and burn in the week, month following of, oh my gosh, like that was a lot. What did I do? I still have to process all these things. So we're giving more to our nervous system as input than our nervous system can cope with necessarily in the moment. Relationally, yeah, absolutely. You may misread a situation and cross a boundary without even realizing that you've done that. And of course, that can impact the future possibilities of intimacy and connection. I think as well, in the bigger picture, if you're constantly jumping in and skipping these other layers, you're never actually developing the skills of those layers. So if you're always going straight into intimacy and always going into like, let's use physical intimacy, for example, always wanting to touch people and never working on like, who is this person? Where do they like to be touched? Where does it feel safe for us to engage and touch together? Then you're actually missing out on a huge piece of getting to know this person. And in a sense, there's a kind of objectification that's happening there. You're using this person purely as a means to meet your own needs and not actually seeing them as a person.
Mm. Mm.
And this is where I can see this translating to the way that we're using medicines. Because if we're not taking that time to feel into the relationship with it, if we're only using medicines as a means to get our needs met, rather than seeing them as beings with some level of agency, what are we doing to that relationship?